This happened around 6 years ago. My ex and I were visiting England and we ended up lost in a not so savoury part of town and it was starting to get late. This was before Uber and we couldn't find a taxi cab. We decided to wait for the next train and ended up finding out from a nice old homeless man which train to take. However, we have a good 30-minute wait for the train. My ex decides he has to use the bathroom, so I stood outside while he used it. The station was completely deserted, save for one person. At first, I couldn't decipher if it was a man or a woman. However, upon closer inspection, it became clear it was a woman, probably in her mid to late 40s, except she had that hard look about her. She was wearing men's combat boots, jeans that were tied and looked like rope, with a man's flannel shirt. She was skinny, greasy hair under a knit cap, and she was twitchy. My ex and I were used to seeing junkies as we both had grown up in California, and our home city had its fair share of junkies and tweakies. Anyway, she sat there occasionally mumbling to herself, but we didn't pay her any mind. Mostly, we passed by the time by playing with a deck of cards I had in my purse. The train pulls up and we get on. It's pretty empty, so we have our choice of seats. Of course she sits right in front of us, even though there was rows of seats. We settle in our seat and we have about 12 stops before we can get off. Meanwhile, she turns to us and starts crackling. She barely has any teeth, and the combination between that and her heavy Cockney accent makes it pretty hard to understand. But she starts telling my ex that she would give him a proper jobby if she'd give her some money. Now at the time we weren't up with British slang and the both of us were like, "You'll give him a job?" And my ex is telling her he doesn't need a job. She's getting worked up and the conductor tells her she better be quiet or he'll toss her off again. So she mutters that he can fuck right off under her breath and starts mumbling. It was hard to catch, but she called me a slag and some not so nice names. Thankfully, we were back into the nicer part of the city and our stop was coming out. We signalled to the conductor we wanted off and then the train pulled up to our stop. We get out, so does our friend. My ex tells me we should grab dinner as we're both starving, and we head to the pub not far from our hotel we had seen the night previous. Meanwhile, she's behind us, and she's taunting at us. And I get a little worried, as obviously she's off her rockers. We make a run for it, and get lost in a crowd. We think that's the end of it, and go to eat in the pub. We come out of the pub about an hour later, and head up the block to our hotel, where we hear, "That's them!" We turn around, and our friend along with two rough-looking characters are coming up the sidewalk. We book it for our hotel, which after a rich pub meal isn't easy, and luckily, once we got inside, the doorman shoos them away. Thankfully, we didn't see them again. So crazy, British lady. Let's not meet again. This happened a couple of years ago when I had moved back to the city that I grew up in. I was separated from my husband and about to start the divorce process, so I was still getting used to the single mum thing. I had to go to Walmart one day and I had no choice but to take my 5-year-old and my 1-year-old daughters along. I was pretty distracted at the time dealing with my 5-year-old daughter, who loved to run away from me at the store, but thankfully this wasn't a story about her being snatched. But I noticed a man in the same aisle as me for quite a while, which I brushed off as a coincidence. We got to the candy aisle and I was looking at something on the shelf. When I turned around, the man was right behind me, like his face was probably in my hair. Still, I wanted to believe the best and I said I'm sorry as I assumed I was in his way. I noticed someone with a walkie-talkie, telling to come with him. Still being naive, I assumed he was stealing. I paid for my items and I went to leave when I was stopped by loss prevention/security and asked me to come with them, which was scary and embarrassing. I knew I hadn't stolen anything, so I assumed my kids had pocketed something. The person who pulled me up into the room said, "You're not in any trouble, but I think you need to know what was going on. Did you notice a man following you?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, I saw someone near us, but I assumed it was a coincidence." He asked me to make sure I didn't know who the man was, and it wasn't some weird sex thing. Then they informed me the man had been following me and my kids around masturbating. They didn't know why, or if he was interested in me or in my girls. I was horrified. They informed me the man had been banned from the store, and they walked me to the car to make sure we left safely. I didn't know why they didn't call the police, and in hindsight I should have. I was just so freaked out and wanted me and my kids to get home safely. So to the man masturbating behind me in Walmart, let's not meet. I work at a grocery store, and we close at 12. I usually get the closing shift, and somebody leaves around 11:30, leaving just me and the manager. I'm working with my friend Carol, who is a really petite girl and is about 5 foot and probably 90 pounds. At about 11 PM, two drunk dudes come in and with a weird accent and start talking to her. I was on register and barely heard the conversation, but I heard one of them asking when she gets off. A little bit after talking to her some more, I see one of them get visibly frustrated and leave. We thought nothing of it. We deal with a lot of drunks and angry people at this time, so it was nothing out of the ordinary. Eventually, it was around 11:30, so she clocked out and she had some shopping to do, which she finished around 11:50. I tell her she might as well wait for me to clock out, as it'll only be another 10 minutes anyways. I should mention now that I've been called intimidating numerous times because I have really broad shoulders, which makes me look way bigger than I am, and I have a constant bitch face, which makes it look like I'm pissed off all the time. Also, my manager is pretty intimidating as he's a big dude. He kinda looks like Brock Lesnar if he grew out his hair and gained a couple pounds. So a pretty burly, intimidating dude. Anyways, we all walk out, just talking shit to one another, when we see two dudes run out from a corner straight to a truck. One guy was holding what looked like a bat and the other guy had some sort of towel. My manager took out his phone and got a picture of the license plate before they got away. Carol realised right away that it was the guys that she was talking to before. This is when she explained to us that they kept asking her when she was off and if she was free. She slipped up and said she didn't have a boyfriend, so they were most likely waiting outside that entire time for her to come out, but got scared when they saw two other guys walking with her. It's crazy to think that if she would have left when she was planning to, she could have been seriously hurt or even worse. Context: I'm a 210-pound male who is 6'1". One night, not too long ago, about 3 AM, I was waiting for the subway to take me back to Manhattan. I was the only one on the platform, or at least I thought I was. I walked down to the end of the subway platform and sat on one of the old benches. Looking down at my phone and listening to music, I hadn't realised someone else had not only entered the subway station, but was standing right over me. I looked up to see a very well-dressed man in an expensive-looking fitted suit with a total blank stare. I sat there frozen, having never experienced anything like this. He grabbed my leg and says, "Let's fool around while we wait for the train." I immediately stood up and started backing away. Only I'd begun backing myself into the wall by the subway tunnel. I had nowhere to go. The well-dressed, dead-eyed man was closing in on me, and without even thinking about it, I put my hands on his shoulders and pushed him as hard as I could. I felt his body completely collapse under my push, almost as if I folded him in half. Then I heard him slam into the concrete ground of the platform, and he laid there, totally motionless. I was convinced at the time that the man was dead. I ran up the subway entrance to see if any cops were hanging out up where they usually do, but there was none. I returned to the platform to find the man pulling himself up and getting on the bench I was sitting at earlier. I was relieved he wasn't dead, but I hope he learned his lesson. I then took an Uber home instead of the subway. So well-dressed, dead-eyed man, let's not meet again. When I was around 11 years old, I was at home babysitting my younger cousins while my mum went to the grocery store. We lived in a basement apartment. The basement only had 2 apartments that were right across from each other. On the side our apartment was on, there was the laundry room. The laundry room was fairly large, and that's where most people who had bikes would chain them. I was watching television with my younger cousins when I heard a knock at the door. This is super weird to me already because literally no one had ever visited us out of nowhere, and my mother had her own key. I was super short, so I had to get a small chair to stand up so I could see through the peephole. I looked through the peephole and there was some giant dude I've never seen before. I remember saying hi and then saying, "Can I help you?" The door was still definitely locked though. This man proceeds to tell me that my bike was stolen from the laundry room. He continued talking though, so I said, I'm sorry? He proceeds to repeat himself, but then he adds that he knows what his bike smells like. I remember being so fucking confused and could not imagine where he was going with this. I said, "I'm sorry your bike got stolen?" Then he says that because he knows what his bike smells like, that I have to open my door so he can smell my hands. Smell my fucking hands? I got so freaked out that I almost started crying and kept saying, "I'm sorry, but I didn't steal your bike." He starts getting super aggressive and pounding on the door, and saying that he needs to smell my hands so he can make sure that I didn't steal his bike. I then got off my chair and started screaming "Mum" over and over again as if she was home. This is all for his benefit because I speak a different language and would never call mother mum. I did this throughout the apartment as if I was going to get her, and when I checked afterwards he was gone. Let's not meet again, stolen bike / hand smelling weirdo. I've always been a lanky and unmuscular man. Needless to say, when I came face to face with a big dude holding a knife in the middle of the night, I was pretty much fucked. I was walking home from my closing shift on a warm summer night last year when he stepped out of the shadows and demanded my wallet. I didn't immediately reach for it. I guess I was in shock, and he stepped closer and yelled at me to empty my pockets. When the realization set into us that this guy is ready to kill me over a meager $20 I had on me, a white moth fluttered between us. To my surprise, the mugger began screaming and swinging his knife at the bug, which only caused it to fly around more sporadically. Those furious eyes which had been looking at me for a few seconds ago were now shrouded in fear and not breaking their focus on the moth. I took karate lessons for a few years when I was a young boy, so I took advantage of the large man desperately flaying at a small insect and performed the #1 move recommended by all reputable martial arts schools. I ran like hell. I ran all the way home, occasionally glancing behind myself, but I never saw him following me. He had other matters to attend to, I suppose. So a simple lesson for wannabe criminals: before attempting to commit a crime, go see a therapist for help getting over your dumb phobias.